Rain poured down on Chicago, the kind that seemed to wash the city in streaks of gray and made streetlights flicker like nervous signals. The water pooled on the cracked sidewalks, reflecting the neon signs and creating crooked, shifting mirrors that held brief glimpses of passing strangers and old regrets. Under the faded red awning of Moe's diner, Jack stood perfectly still, a figure blurred by the mist and half hidden in the shadow. He pulled his coat tighter, watching the drops roll off the edge of the awning and listening to the soft, rattling sound above his head. Years of service in the army still hung on his shoulders, and despite every effort, he couldn't quite shake the feeling that violence or trouble was always around the corner. That night, luck, or maybe bad timing, brought him face to face with Ray, the head of a group of cops known for shaking down anyone they pleased whenever they felt bored. Ray spotted Jack in the dim doorway and, with nothing better to do, decided to make him a target for a few cheap laughs. But as Ray started tossing insults, his youngest partner, Sam, stood a few steps behind and noticed Jack's steady, unreadable gaze. Something about the way Jack didn't flinch or look away made Sam shift his weight nervously, feeling a chill crawl up his spine, as if he was witnessing the start of something much bigger and more dangerous than a cruel joke in the rain. It all happened in a flash. Ray and his crew closed in on Jack, their boots sending up dirty water as they shoved him against the brick wall outside the diner. The rain did nothing to cool their tempers. One of them yanked Jack's wallet from his pocket and tossed it carelessly into the gutter, where it floated with a few crumpled bills and a faded photograph. Fists came next, quick, practiced, and meant to send a message. Jack didn't resist. He was outnumbered, and years of training told him when to wait it out. Blood mixed with rain as his face hit the sidewalk, and before he could get his bearings, cold handcuffs snapped around his wrists. Ray barked orders, and the other cops hauled Jack up, hardly noticing the almost eerie calm on his face. He didn't curse or beg. He just met each of them with the same steady look, as if he was memorizing details for later. Sam, the rookie, felt anxiety gnaw at his stomach. The ride to the station was silent, except for the distant hum of the city at night. Even in the back seat, slumped and bleeding, Jack's quiet presence made the air heavy, and Sam had the uneasy sense that something was about to shift in a big way. Inside the holding cell, Jack stayed perfectly still on the thin bench, his back straight and eyes sharp. The walls were old and damp, the air heavy with the smell of bleach and metal. Every little noise, a door clanging in the distance, muffled voices from the booking desk, was noted and logged in his mind. Even as his face throbbed from the beating, his focus never wavered. He counted the steps each guard took past the cells, tracked how often they looked his way, and kept an eye on the blinking red light above the only camera in the narrow hallway. To anyone glancing in, Jack looked like every other exhausted, battered man waiting for paperwork to get finished. But his mind was busy, reading the room in ways few ever could. Meanwhile, across the booking area, Sam couldn't shake his curiosity. The calm way Jack had reacted just didn't fit with the typical crowd they picked up. When Sam finally typed Jack's fingerprints into the department system, the reaction was immediate. The computer flashed a warning in big red letters: National Security Alert. Contact Homeland Security at once. Sam stared at the screen, his palms getting clammy. Before, Jack had just been an unlucky stranger. Now, it was clear he was mixed up in something big, something that made even the bravest feel dangerously out of their depth. Sam realized he was in way over his head, and that everyone in the station might be as well. Everything about the night seemed strange, but it got even stranger when the old desk phone in the squad room rang before sunrise. Sam reached for it, but Ray grabbed the receiver first. The voice on the other end was cold and crisp, introducing herself as Agent Taylor from Homeland Security. She didn't bother with small talk. She simply ordered, in a tone that allowed for no argument, that Jack Bennett be released at once. Ray started to protest, demanding to know why and who this guy actually was, but Agent Taylor cut him off. "Release him right now," she repeated, and the line clicked dead. Ray fumed, his face reddening as he slammed the phone down, but he had no choice. Orders from Homeland Security were as good as law, and nobody wanted to bring heat down on CT, their station. So just as the first pink light crept above the skyline, Jack was led from his cell, chin held high, though his lip was split. A small plastic bag held his wallet, his watch, and a few coins. But his metal box was missing, the one that kept his old army dog tags. That loss clearly stung, but he didn't fight it. As Jack left, he met Ray's eyes. He didn't need to say a word. The look he gave was sharper than anything he could have spoken, promising that what had started here was far from finished. Ray tried to hold Jack's stare, but in the end he looked away, unsettled and suddenly unsure of which side he was really on. Jack walked out of the precinct just as the day started to warm the cold Chicago air. He stopped for a second, breathing in deeply, taking a mental note of the neighborhood's worn buildings and early morning traffic. It felt good to be out, but he was too experienced to trust freedom that came so suddenly. As he made his way down Oak Street, he spotted a black SUV crawling behind him. The kind that was either driven by government types or people you definitely didn't want to run into alone. Jack pretended not to notice, taking turn after turn, sometimes ducking into back alleys, sometimes passing through a closed pawn shop side lot, hoping to lose whoever was trailing him. But it became clear he wasn't shaking them. A couple of blocks later, the SUV screeched to a stop across his path. 4 men slid out, dressed in nondescript black jackets, guns in hand but faces blank. No words were exchanged. There was no need. In under 30 seconds, Jack's years of army training kicked in. He dodged a punch, slammed one man against a dumpster, swept another's legs on wet asphalt, and used the butt of a discarded pipe to knock the last attacker cold. He barely paused to catch his breath, checking for any more threats. The message had been sent loud and clear for whoever was watching. Jack wasn't someone you could pick off the street. If anything, he was the one hunting, not the one being hunted. Word of the shootout spread fast in the tight circles of Chicago's underworld and the police force that still played both sides. Ray was in his tiny office at the precinct, nursing a bitter cup of coffee and hoping the chaos had ended, when his cell phone buzzed with a number he instantly recognized but wished he didn't. On the other end was Victor Russo, a crime boss with deep connections everywhere, his voice calm but menacing. Victor skipped right over greetings and got to the point. He accused Ray outright, saying his little power trip had stirred up something nobody wanted to face. "You woke up a ghost, Ray," Victor warned. "People high up want him forgotten, not pissed off. Now you got both of us after your head." Ray's hands shook as he ended the call, sweat gathering at his brow. He realized he wasn't just dealing with some ex-soldier anymore. By humiliating Jack, he had set off a chain of events involving people and forces far outside his control. Suddenly, every shadow in the precinct seemed more threatening, every passing car a possible threat. Ray understood, deep in his gut, there was no putting this genie back in the bottle. He had poked a sleeping lion, and now he was hunted from both sides, with no place to run. While Ray tried to keep his panic in check, Jack moved with purpose through the city's winding back streets. He found his way to the Lower West Side, where old warehouses had been turned into the kind of spots people only visited if they needed something they could not get elsewhere. Jack knocked twice on a rusted door before it opened a crack, revealing a hard face he had not seen in years. It was Mike Connolly, a fellow veteran who now made his living helping those who lived in the gray parts of Chicago. Mike did not waste words. He handed Jack a battered duffel bag packed with 2 handguns, some extra magazines, a new driver's license, and a folder thick with details about Victor Russo. Maps, photos, lists of safe houses and dirty cops. All the information Jack needed to track Victor's operation. The mood between them was tight but respectful. Mike saw right away that Jack was not the beaten man from the news. Gone was any sign of defeat. Jack checked over the gear, put on a fresh shirt, and holstered a pistol inside his jacket. His focus was absolute. For too long, Victor Russo had bled the city dry and counted on fear to keep everyone silent. That time was coming to an end. Jack was finished hiding. Now, the city would remember what happened when someone pushed the wrong man too far. Victor Russo was furious after hearing that his men had not only failed, but were now out of commission. His face was set in a scowl as he barked orders into his phone, demanding that every resource be thrown at bringing Jack Bennett down. Soon, word went out to all corners of Chicago's darker side. Well-paid enforcers and dirty cops alike were offered a hefty reward to hunt Jack. It didn't take long for the city's mood to shift. People who usually prided themselves on minding their own business started glancing over their shoulders. Bars emptied, quicker than usual, and whispers about a ghost in the alleys spread through the neighborhoods. It was as if the very city was holding its breath, waiting for someone to make the next move. Meanwhile, across town, Sam found himself tangled in knots of doubt and curiosity. Though he was still just a patrol officer, the puzzle gnawed at him. Instead of looking the other way like most would, Sam started a quiet search of his own. He stayed up late at the police workstation, following digital breadcrumbs and making careful calls. It became clear to him that Ray and Victor Russo were tied into something deep and rotten. Sam knew every step forward forced him closer to a line he might not be able to uncross, but the need for truth pushed him on. He wanted answers, not just for himself, but for the city that deserved better. The tension that had been simmering around Chicago finally broke one muggy night when Jack Bennett struck at the heart of Victor Russo's operations. Jack crept through the shadows behind an old warehouse on the south side, planted explosives in the main storage units, and waited until the guards were grouped together before triggering the blast. The explosion shook windows for blocks and sent smoke billowing into the sky. People who had been held captive in locked rooms, some for months, ran for the exits as sirens blared from every direction. Within minutes, television news vans swarmed the scene, broadcasting images of flames and wounded men stumbling out onto the street. It was all over the news by morning, exposing the ugly reality that had been hidden just underneath the city's surface. Federal agents descended on Chicago, picking over the wreckage as questions aimed at local law enforcement grew sharper. For Victor Russo, the hit was personal and humiliating. Furious and desperate to hold on to what remained of his power, he turned the screws on Ray, calling him repeatedly and demanding updates with an edge that bordered on panic. Ray was at his breaking point. He knew he had lost control and was just another pawn who could be sacrificed if things went south. Each new order made it painfully clear he was trapped in something far more dangerous than he had ever bargained for. Still reeling from the fallout of the warehouse attack, Sam was barely keeping up with the chaos. His apartment on the north side had always felt like a safe haven, but that night he found himself startled by a sudden knock at the door. He tensed, his heart racing, and hesitated for a second before peering through the peephole. Staring back at him, unmistakable even in the dim light, was Jack Bennett. Sam hesitated, then opened the door, his hand ready at his side just in case. Jack stepped in quietly, carrying a manila folder thick with documents and photographs. Without wasting time, he spread them out on the kitchen table under the tired glow of the ceiling light. For the next hour, Jack laid out everything: evidence of Victor Russo's trafficking, lists of compromised officers, bank statements, even phone recordings. Jack spoke with a directness that made it impossible for Sam to look away. There was no sugarcoating any of it. When Jack finally finished, he hit Sam with a choice. They could team up to bring the whole rotten operation down, but it would not. Just be dangerous. It would put a target on everyone Sam cared about. Sam sat for a long while, feeling the weight of every possible outcome settle on his shoulders. He knew this decision would change everything about his future, and nothing about it would be easy. Ray ended up as bait for Victor Russo, whether he liked it or not. One rainy Thursday night, Russo's men dragged him into a flashy club just off Michigan Avenue. The place looked expensive, but everyone with half a brain in Chicago knew it was a front for dirty deals. Inside, security was tighter than ever. Armed guards leaned against walls, their eyes never resting. Ray wasn't allowed to leave the private lounge, and even his phone was taken away. He could feel the eyes of hired muscle on him all night, most of them just itching for action. At the head of the pack was Eddie Miller, an ex-army guy with a stare that always felt 2 steps ahead and a reputation for handling problems quickly and quietly. Everyone expected Jack to show up guns blazing. That was Russo's plan. Force Jack into a corner and crush him in public, but Jack played it smarter. Instead of a frontal assault, he sent Ray a message that chilled him to the core. A single pistol round placed in an envelope with his badge number scratched on the casing. Alongside it was a note, short and sharp, promising that it would end soon, but not in the way anyone watching expected. Ray's hands shook as he read it in the club's dim back room. Now, Ray's fear was turning into paranoia. Every sound outside the door made him jump, knowing full well he had become a pawn in someone else's deadly game. As Victor, Russo and Eddie Miller doubled down on security, bringing in more men and locking every entrance. Jack Bennett pulled off his boldest move yet. One stormy night, while most of Chicago was glued to the local news about the explosion weeks before, Jack slipped through the maze of storage depots along the lakefront. Using old contacts and perfect timing, he targeted the city's busiest smuggling terminal. He moved fast, sabotaged the security systems, and set off small charges that destroyed ledgers, hard drives, and entire crates of evidence. With alarms blaring, guards scrambled everywhere, only to find empty cages. Jack had freed another group of trafficked victims and guided them out through a hidden exit before fading into the rain. The timing forced Russo to pull back his operations, leaving his organization exposed right when federal investigators had eyes on everything. In the chaos, Ray's bad luck caught up to him. Jack cornered Ray in a filthy side office behind the terminal. Ray, drugged by his own people so he would not cause trouble, was barely conscious as Jack tied his wrists and searched his pockets for anything useful. With no other bargaining chip, Jack decided to use Ray as leverage. Beaten and lost, Ray was now nothing but a pawn, someone Jack hoped could help unravel the rest of Russo's plan. Armed with the new details Ray had spilled, Jack and Sam wasted no time. They drove across town in Sam's battered Chevy, clutching a list of names and addresses scrawled hurriedly on a napkin. Their first stop was a quiet cafe where Sam's old academy friend now worked for Homeland Security. After a quick but tense meeting, Homeland agents put together a task force overnight. By sunrise, raids were rolling out all across Chicago, with SWAT trucks and federal vehicles blocking off entire blocks. One by one, stash houses and drop points went down. News stations flooded the airwaves with footage of dramatic arrests and piles of seized cash. The city, so long used to secret deals and whispered threats, was shocked by just how deep the corruption ran. Cops were led away in cuffs, business owners made excuses to reporters, and politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the mess. Still, no one celebrated. There was a sense it was far from over. Back in the shadows, Victor Russo watched his empire collapse. Pressed on all sides and getting desperate, he crossed a line. He sent his men to snatch Sam's family in the dead of night, a quiet suburban street now filled with fear. In a single move, Victor made it clear that the fight was personal. With loved ones now at risk, the battle between law and crime grew even more dangerous, leaving everyone involved more desperate than ever. The moment Jack heard about the kidnapping, everything else dropped from his mind. He barely took time to explain to Sam, just tossed him the keys and shouted for him to get in. They tore through the city, weaving between late-night traffic and running red lights, both desperate to get there before anything worse could happen. Every block seemed longer than the last. Jack scanned his phone for clues, piecing together bits from intercepted texts and Ray's reluctant intel to figure out where Victor Russo's men had stashed Sam's family. By the time they reached a rundown warehouse on the city's edge, dawn was breaking. The tension was suffocating. Jack and Sam crept in, keeping low behind stacks of pallets and crates. Inside, Eddie Miller's muscle waited, clearly ready for trouble. There was no way to avoid a fight. Bullets tore through the shadows as Jack returned fire, pushing forward. In the middle of the chaos, Marcus, a cousin of Sam's who had always acted as a protector, threw himself in front of the gunman, taking the brunt of the attack so the others could break free. His sacrifice bought Jack and Sam enough time to find and untie Sam's terrified family. They hurried out into the early morning, shaken and grieving, forever marked by what had happened in that dark warehouse. After making sure Sam's family was safe and cared for by the paramedics waiting nearby, Jack did not waste a minute. Bruised, but still sharp, he set his sights on Victor Russo's mansion in Lake Forest, determined to put an end to all the suffering once and for all. He drove there alone, clearing his head with every mile. When Jack arrived, the place looked more like a fortress than a home, complete with tall fences, armed men patrolling the grounds, and high-end security technology blinking from every corner. Moving quietly along the tree line, Jack relied on every trick he had picked up over years, spent fighting street wars and dodging dirty cops. He disabled floodlights and tripped silent alarms to distract the guards. By the time he made it to the rear entrance, half the security staff was searching the wrong side of the property. Inside, Jack used quick-hit tactics, planting small charges to set off fire sprinklers and kill the power to the security grid. The confusion let him move deeper until he cornered Victor in a luxurious office piled with stolen cash and paperwork. Victor tried to negotiate, but Jack's mind was already made up. Victor finally realized this was the one fight he could not bully or buy his way out of, and fear settled in as Jack closed the distance. The final clash between Jack and Victor was nothing short of savage. The fight crashed through desks and shattered glass, echoing through the empty halls of the mansion. Things got ugly fast. Jack took a nasty blow to the ribs and blood ran from a cut above his eyebrow, while Victor swung wildly in desperation, trying every dirty trick he knew. Each punch they traded brought them closer to collapse, the air thick with the weight of old grudges. All the expensive security, the armed guards, and the years of careful planning fell away in that moment. It became just two men, each refusing to give up. When Jack finally pinned Victor against the wall, he stood there breathing hard, knuckles raw and heart pounding. He had the chance to finish it right then and there, but he paused. Something in him refused to take that last step. Instead, he stepped back and left Victor on the floor, beaten, humiliated, and forced to watch as his criminal world crumbled. Around him, Jack knew that living with everything he had done and now lost would be punishment enough. At the same time, across the city, federal agents hustled Sam and his shaken family into a waiting van. Marcus, still hurting from his injuries, insisted on riding up front to make sure the family stayed safe. For the first time in days, they could finally breathe. With Victor Russo's empire finally toppled, Chicago's news outlets filled every screen and paper with shocking headlines. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, and news vans crowded the streets as details of the human trafficking and corruption scandal exploded into the open. The whole city seemed to stop and watch, stunned, at the reach of Victor's crimes and the involvement of people once seen as untouchable leaders. Even the mayor gave a televised statement promising change, while neighbors debated latest rumors over morning coffee. Meanwhile, Sam adjusted to life in federal protection with his family. They were moved to a quiet neighborhood where agents kept a discreet but constant presence. Sam knew he would be called to testify against those he once thought he understood. He looked at his kids each night, knowing life would never be the same, but finding some comfort in the hope they could finally live safe and free from fear. Across town, Jack lay in a hospital bed, barely hanging on. After the brutal fight, doctors worked for hours to stabilize him, and every breath was a small battle. When Sam visited, he brought grim news. The investigation revealed Victor had only been a middleman. There was an even bigger group called Black River, pulling strings all over the world. For Jack, the fight was far from finished. Despite barely making it through surgery and still hooked up to machines, Jack refused to slow down. The nurses kept telling him to rest, but his mind kept spinning with everything Sam had told him about Black River, the shadowy group behind the whole mess. Even as pain shot through his side, Jack started making phone calls, pulling every old favor he had from his years on the force. He knew letting up was not an option now that the stakes had grown far beyond Chicago. After a day or two, with his voice raw but steady, Jack reached out to Sam while he was still under federal watch. He explained his plans straight. They would need inside knowledge, more grit, and total commitment. In exchange for Sam's help, and above all, his promise to come back if anything went wrong, Jack arranged round-the-clock security for Sam's family. He wanted Sam to be all in, even if it meant leaving his safe new life and turning away from his fresh start. Sam did not answer right away. He thought about how much he had lost and what he had learned about himself and the people he trusted. In the end, protecting others meant more than hiding. He shook Jack's hand, accepting the mission without looking back. In that moment, an unbreakable alliance formed, one that would send ripples through the hidden world they were up against. Several months slipped by, and Sam slowly adjusted to life with his new name out in the wilds of Montana. The days took on a calmer rhythm, almost peaceful, as his family began to recover from everything that had happened. They lived quietly, always looking over their shoulders, but trying their best to move forward. Then on a cold, grey morning, a battered package turned up on the porch. There was no return address and nothing written on the outside. Inside, buried in a bed of packing peanuts, Sam found a simple flash drive and a strange old insignia, something that looked military, but nothing he recognized. He knew right away it was from Jack. Curiosity and dread churned in Sam's stomach as he plugged the flash drive into his laptop behind locked doors. The video opened with Jack's face, looking older, a bit more worn, but his eyes still sharp. Jack outlined what he had uncovered. Black River had not disappeared, but instead had regrouped, now led by someone named Colonel David Price. Jack's voice grew serious as he explained that Price was not just another faceless enemy, but someone he had dealt with badly in the past. The video ended with Jack's words ringing clear. This fight was far from over, and Sam's help was needed now more than ever. It was not long before black SUVs rolled up the gravel drive at sunrise, their windows too dark to see inside. Agents flashed badges and quietly explained that it was time to move again. This time, though, there was no fear in Sam's heart, just a sense that running was over and action was about to begin. He hugged his family, promising to come back, then climbed into the car without looking back. After hours of twisting roads and switched vehicles, Sam found himself at a remote airstrip, winds whipping hard across the empty fields. Inside a nondescript hangar, he was led down a long hallway to an underground command center unlike anything he had seen before. That is where he saw Jack again. They exchanged a brief, honest hug. No words needed. Standing nearby was Commander Jennifer Hughes, the new leader of the task force put together to finally take down Black River. The room buzzed with activity. Maps stretched across walls, agents checked weapons and gear, and faint chatter filled the air. Jennifer briefed them all, saying straight up that this operation was bigger than anything the agency had tried. Their target, Colonel David Price, the new head of Black River. As the big transport plane lifted off into the heavy morning sky, Jack and Sam settled into their seats, glancing at each other. The lives they once knew were gone for good, but whatever waited ahead, they faced it shoulder to shoulder, ready to fight for something that mattered: justice and a fresh start.